So I'm here in Kingston, Ontario for the Reelout LGBT Film and Video Festival 2021. I'm here with Bruce LaBruce, who is an internationally acclaimed filmmaker based in Toronto. His films include No Skin Off My Ass from 1991, Hustler White 1996, Gerontophilia 2013, and The Misandrous 2017. We're here to talk to Bruce about Saint-Narcisse, his 2020 film, which will be showing at Reelout this year. Set in Quebec in 1972, it tells the story of twins who fall in love and begin a relationship with each other. And it premiered at the 77th Venice Film Festival. So welcome, Bruce, and thank you for doing this interview.
My pleasure.
And I was wondering if maybe we could begin with you and just talk a little bit about your film. How did it come to be? What do you want us to know about this movie?
This is the second film I've made in Quebec with, Quebec financing. So it was financed by Quebec Telefilm and Sodec. And the first one was Gerontophilia in 2013. And, it's both of them are like films that are a departure for me in a way, like they're bigger budgets and working more within an industry kind of model, for the whole process, which is not something I usually have done. I usually make guerrilla films and really underground films. So it's been really interesting. It's like working with unions for the first time and all that kind of stuff. So the process of making the films has been really interesting for me. Gerontophilia was a big challenge because there's also the special effects in it, the twin effects, which we tried to keep to a minimum in terms of CGI. There's very little actual CGI. It's mostly old school techniques of split screen and body doubles and stuff like that. And in terms of the content and why Quebec and why the period, I'm a huge fan of Quebecois cinema, and I was referencing some specific Quebecois films by Paul Allman in particular, who was married to Geneviève Bujold, and they made these three films together: Isabelle, The Act of the Heart, and Journey. And they're kind of more like European art films in a way, and they often are based on like family secrets and incest or kind of hidden kind of something that's hidden in the past that comes out, or ghosts or kind of ghosts of the past and things like that. And they're very aesthetic and tackling taboos. Those films were made in the 70s, so I set this film in the 70s. So.
Very cool. And I see that the film has received a US distributor called Best Friends Forever. Can you talk a little bit about getting the film distributed?
Yeah, well, actually, Best Friends Forever is my international sales agent. So they're based in Europe, and they've sold it to Film Movement in the States and Raven Banner in Canada. They're selling it, region by region around the world. They're a really great sort of relatively new distributor, and it's really challenging these days. I mean, we premiered the film at the Venice Film Festival in September, and we were just early September. We were really lucky because there was a bit of a window there where all the COVID numbers were down, and so my producer Nicolas Comeau and my star Felix Antoine Duval, we all traveled to the Venice Film Festival for the premiere, and there was an actual audience, and actually the ambassador, the Canadian ambassador to Italy, came from Rome for the screening, and it was very glamorous. So I'm glad we had that experience. Felix had never been at a big international film festival before. So, um, and yeah, based on that and some other high profile film festival screenings like in South Korea and in Sitges in Spain. It has a certain profile, so it's getting some good distribution. It's always a challenge, and these guys are really, already it was getting difficult to distribute independent films, and so COVID has kind of accelerated it and kind of made distributors and sales agents really come up with new models of distribution, and so these guys are really good at that kind of thing.
Excellent. Well, thank you. Some are suggesting in your recent work certain changes. I mean, you mentioned just now that Gerontophilia and Saint-Narcisse are a move away from guerrilla filmmaking, and I'm just wondering, is there, do you feel that there's big changes in your work recently? Is there a change in terms of how you write films or how you decide to structure them? Is there a change in your process now that you're making less independent films, less guerrilla, potentially some are suggesting even potentially less sexually explicit films? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, both those films are not sexually explicit. There's nudity, but they're not sexually explicit. Yeah, I mean, it's not really, I don't consider it a move away or a progression, because I'm still making porn films as well, like on the side. So I work for Erica Lust. In fact, I'll be doing another project with them in the near future. And they're a Barcelona-based porn company, more female-centric, kind of feminist, or more a kind of a woke porn company, and also Cocky Boys, which is a U.S. distributor. I made a porn film for the Tom of Finland Foundation recently as well. So, and that's more like in the style of my old guerrilla filmmaking. I mean, I'm still working with good cameras and cinematographers and stuff, but it's crazy content. Mm-hmm. So I hope to be able to do both. I mean, it's partly, I think any filmmaker wants to reach a wider audience at a certain point. You don't want, it's kind of the preaching to the converted kind of like phenomenon where you don't always want to be talking to the same audience, and which is why I got into making genre films as well, like horror zombie films, which got me a whole different audience, with my films Otto and LA Zombie. But I like, even within the model of the more industry or indie kind of film model, I still find that I try to tackle still really challenging themes and difficult themes, and just do it within more of the sort of conventions of narrative, of mainstream narrative cinema, which is fun because you're kind of like perverting the conventions of the romantic comedy, for example, or making unexpected juxtapositions of genres, like gore and horror mixed with like social awareness films, or something very strange like that. Agitprop political films that are also pornographic, but in terms of the mainstream, yeah, Gerontophilia is about intergenerational love, and of course, Gerontophilia, Saint-Narcisse is about twin incest, so they're kind of taboo subjects, yeah, and goes in a kind of more mainstream romantic way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Your work often tackles taboo subjects. So certainly, having recently rewatched Hustler White, I think that's fairly evident. But famously, your work also really resists, as you've already elaborated on, labels, and your films are difficult for critics and scholars to categorize. For instance, some people put you in the category of queercore or homocore, whereas other people are quite keen to categorize your films under the New Queer Cinema banner, which was coined by B. Ruby Rich in 1992. And that's a label, as I understand, that that you're not comfortable with, and that you've rejected.
Well, not entirely, but I mean, I have to say, B. Ruby Rich completely excluded me from her book, you know, and I've run into her since at festivals and kind of threw her some shade for that. But you know, because I think it's partly because my films are pornographic, and certain people don't want, you know, there's a kind of a politically correct idea that that gays should, gay filmmakers, lesbian, LGBTQI, should present a more responsible or you know, kind of like
Or
palatable kind of
yeah.
palatable image of gays. So I'm kind of the bad gay because I make films about all these strange fetishes, and they're sexually explicit, and they're often somewhat politically incorrect. So so I was kind of marginalized by the marginal, which is kind of like a theme that runs through marginalized by the marginalized, you know.
Yeah.
It's a theme that kind of runs through all my work, and it's fine, you know. I'm happy to occupy that space. So, but I love the new queer film making films, and I'm friends with it. You know, I'm friends with Isaac Julian, and I go way back with John Grayson, and I go way back with Gus Van Sant, and I am friendly with Greg Araki, and you know, the Todds, and you know, all the people like that. So so it's not a it's not like I don't like those films, or that I am, you know, against them. But the queercore is more kind of, queercore 2 has also become kind of co-opted as well. I mean, it's I don't really align myself with it as a movement, if it still exists. But I do maintain a punk ethos, I think, in my films, which is not only being provocative, but kind of being both ambiguous and kind of ambivalent about your own representation of sexuality, and also being, you know, I'm not against shock value for its own sake, but I'm also into the idea of making work that the challenges conventions, aesthetic conventions as well, and also not only critiquing the right, but also the radical right, but the radical left as well, which is a theme that runs through my work, the oppressed becoming the oppressor.
Thank you. Very, very cool. One of the things that has come up with Saint-Narcisse specifically, but I think that this is actually a running theme with a lot of your work, is the theme of obsession. And the Saint-Narcisse has been described by a critic in the Hollywood Reporter as rightfully obsessed with itself. And another critic has described it as a film about narcissistic malaise, which I thought was a very interesting way to describe the film. But then just going back to Hustler White as well, right? Your character in that film becomes very obsessed and very dedicated to his pursuit of the hustler. And so it seems to me that obsession with oneself or with another person is a running theme. Do you find that to be a running theme? Is that something that you think returns for you in the film making or writing process?
Yeah, I mean, I have a photo book coming out later this year called Fixations. So,
Oh,
which is another word for obsession, I guess. And even fetish is almost another word for obsession. And fetishes, most of my films are about fetishes, and they really intrigue me because you know some people think certain fetishes are gross and demeaning and kind of perverted or something. Um, Whereas I see them almost in a more romantic way, where the object of desire, the fetish object, is revered by the by the person who has the fetish. There's a certain reverence, a certain almost devotion, kind of like a almost a spiritual devotion to the object of desire, whether it be an amputee fetish or a fetish for the elderly, or or a fetish for oneself, like a kind of narcissistic fetish. Um, so my films try to see the romance in that kind of thing. It's also kind of something that I'm jealous of or envious of people who have that kind of like extreme devotion to anything, because I'm more kind of like a little wishy-washy and kind of like, I'm an agnostic, and I call myself a radical pragmatist. I kind of float around and kind of support revolutionary moments, but I'm not fixated on any one thing or any one ideology, and so but I'm almost envious of people who have that kind of like extreme commitment to something, and that's why I like revolutionaries as well, make movies about revolutionaries or extreme right wing skinheads or whatever it is. Like it's a weird, not only do I fetishize these people, but I'm fetishizing them as fetishists from themselves.
very interesting. Um, so just back to Saint Narcisse for a second. Is there something that you want the audience to? Well, I guess there's always something that a director, a filmmaker wants the audience to take away from with respect to their film. But is there any theme, any lesson, anything that you want the audience to be left with after watching Saint Narcisse?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty evident that narcissism is a kind of malaise now. I mean, you just have to go on any social media platform and you see it everywhere. Um, you know, there's a scene in the film where um, the film, which is set in 1972, and I set it in 72 to representing a narcissist in 1972 who kind of only takes pictures of himself and is kind of obsessed with his own image. It stands out in stark relief to everything else that's going on at that time, because everyone didn't run around taking pictures of themselves, and everyone wasn't obsessed with their image back then to the extent they are now. And so when she finds the Polaroids that one of the twins, Dominique, has been taking of himself, she says to her mother, "Oh, he only takes pictures he only takes pictures of himself. Who does that?" And it's like, yeah, now everyone does it. Everyone does it.
We all do that.
And so, but I think there's different kinds of narcissism, and I think there is good narcissism, which is kind of like the love thyself kind of, um, you know, um, idea. Um, there's been, generations of homosexuals who've learned to kind of like hate themselves and be, self-loathing. So love yourself is always a good kind of narcissism in a queer context. But it's so there's that, and it's also about this this idea of family romance, where Freud's idea, where there's like these sexual tensions within a nuclear family that are inevitable, And instead of, you know, people feeling incredible guilt and shame about these sexual attractions, to just kind of like observe them and kind of don't judge them so much, just kind of like acknowledge that that sexuality is a very strange and kind of powerful appetite, and that there are two taboos exist for a reason, but I mean certain taboos exist to be broken, I guess.
Very interesting, and that's a theme in well, so we've already talked about the taboo themes and taboo sexuality in your film, but the difficulty categorizing sexuality and the difficulty of finding a line between good and bad sex, that's a recurring theme throughout, I would say, most, if not all of your films.
For sure.
Yeah.
And the non-judgmental part is important. Like, it's easy to judge other people. Like, for example, as a pornographer, you know, I've sometimes run into people who are either kind of dismissive or kind of like who look down their nose at you for making porn, and I'm like, well, I'm sure you know, I'm sure many of them watch porn themselves, and who do they think makes porn? I mean, it doesn't just make itself, you know. Somebody has to make the porn that they're watching, and I, you know, totally. It's kind of a pet peeve of mine that people who look down their nose at pornographers and then watch porn themselves. So I, that kind of judgmental attitude, I kind of like draw attention to, you know, in my films, and make people self-conscious about how they look at others and how they judge others, and how you can look at people who are different and who have different kind of sexual appetites and desires, to look at them in a different way, like to look at them as real people, you know, who also have the same problems as you do, who also have romantic impulses and you know, are just special people.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for joining me today, Bruce. It's really an honor to meet you, an honor to talk to you, and thank you for, you know, allowing us to show your film. And
Hope everyone enjoys it.
Yeah, I'm sure they will.
Okay.
So, okay.
Thank you. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.